just what that means. My conscious life begins, I guess, at 5th grade. And we're living in the Bronx, 1105 Jerome Avenue. And I was there 5th and 6th grade. I remember the library on Shakespeare Avenue. I was a bit of a nutty kid. I remember when I was first introduced to the library, they had a children's section. I started with an author named Altschuler, and my idea was to read every book in the library.
Alphabetically.
But I never got around to it. But it was a pretty good life. The park was across the street, and I walked to school, Pier 73. And then when I got to 6th grade, they had what they call rapid advancement. That means I did 7, 8, and 9 in 2 years. So I went up there, and that's for the first time I ran into too much homework. That was torture, and it warped me. And I wish I'd never done it, but maybe it was good because I was running into too much homework for the rest of my life, including when I started working. Everything was too much, but I thought that was life, so I just did it. My father couldn't take the subway, scared of the subway, the confinement. I think he was in the London Underground when it had some accident, and that just panicked him. In New York City, you traveled by subway. So when we lived in the Bronx, we lived there because he'd take the old 6th Avenue elevated, which doesn't exist anymore, but it was above ground, and he could take that right to work. But then they took the 6th Avenue elevator down, and we had to move. So we moved over to the Inwood section in Manhattan, 193rd Street, off Broadway. Interesting, now I'm living on 194th. And I guess I went there for the 7th grade or so. But anyhow, I took the exam and I wound up at Bronx Science for high school. It was a pretty good school. No girls, all boys school in those days. So I wasn't distracted by girls, which is a good thing, because I had absolutely no idea what to do with girls. And if any girls were there, it would have been a disaster for me. I remember it had a pool, and I used to go down a pool. I never made the swimming team. I never was that good, but I used to knock off laps. And that was a release. And then I went out to soccer. I figured nobody in this country played soccer, and I never played soccer, so I'd be as bad as anybody else. I wasn't. I was worse than anybody else, but I had stamina. And I just could run up and down and go, and I wasn't afraid of body contact. When I was going after a ball, that's all I saw. But anyhow, I got my S for science, big S. My parents, let's start off with my mother. A town outside of Kiev in what is now the Ukraine. In those days, it was Russia, with a big Jewish community. And she was a member of that community. She was born there. And I saw a picture of her home. It was the only thing I remember about. It was kind of big, and it looked like a thatched roof, and it was by the banks of a river. And my great-grandfather grew leeches using the water of the river, and every year he'd collect the leeches and go to the annual fair in Leipzig and sell the leeches, which we use for medicine. So my family was in the medical business for a long time. But my grandfather prepared little Jewish boys for their bar mitzvah. Starting around the 1900s, my extended family, 12, 15 related families, all moved to this country, moved to Philadelphia. And my mother was the last. She had a younger sister and an older sister who left before her, and she stayed behind to take care of her parents. And when her parents died within a year of each other, she came to this country in 1912. Of course, the family was here waiting for her. She did not come to Ellis Island. They sent her money, so she came second class, and if you come second class, customs comes to the boat and interviews on the boat. So when she landed, she bypassed Ellis Island, got off at the dock, and her cousin, Heike Sitkin, Grandma Heike, Johnny's grandmother, if the kids know Johnny, Johnny Sitkin's grandmother, met her there and took her to Philadelphia to their home, and she stayed there. And the story is, I'm going to start crying. The family was in the dressmaking business. They made aprons. So they were familiar with needlework, and they had a machine for her. So the day after she arrived, I'm a very sentimental guy, I cry at movies too. She was sitting in the machine and started working, and she was so good, of course this is all stories they tell me. She was so good that the boss let her off, let her machine be idle so she could go to school. And she learned English, she went to school, she went to Temple University, she studied pharmacy, she met my father at Temple, and the rest is all downhill. So that's my mother come to this country. My father is a little tougher because he made up stories about his family. First of all, he didn't talk much about his family at all. And what he did talk about, he made up a lot. So I don't know what the score is. I learned a lot more from my cousin Sonny. Some of you kids might know him from Israel. And unfortunately, what he tells me doesn't quite square with what my father told me. So I don't know how far back in history to go. But anyhow, my father came from a small town, and at that time was Galicia, part of Austro-Hungarian Empire. And about the only thing my father told me about, that my grandfather and my great-grandfather did a little smuggling across the border between Austro-Hungary and Russia. And I don't know if that's true or not. But what happened was the railroad came through. And so my grandfather got on the railroad and left, went to Germany, found himself a wife, and went to England, went into business. So my father was born in England. The wife he married was a bit interesting. That's my maternal grandmother, sure.
Where am I from? I'm basically a New Yorker. I was born in Brooklyn, but I was 3 years old when we moved to the Bronx. So I went to grade school in Parkchester in the Bronx. And Parkchester is a big apartment development, which is nothing today as it was when we moved in. My family were the first tenants in Parkchester, which was a development built by the Metropolitan Life Insurance Company. And I went to grade school there through 6th grade, PS 106. Then we moved to New Jersey, so I went to junior high and high school. They had junior high then, not middle school, and went to junior high and high school in Englewood, New Jersey. I went to Dwight Morrow High School, which was a beautiful school on a campus. It looked like a college campus. And after that, I went to Boston University for a couple of years, and then I went to Columbia University to study occupational therapy. Nobody knew what occupational therapy was at that time, but we had a newspaper, school newspaper that came out, I forget, once a week or once a month. And on the last page of this newspaper, it was not put out by the school, it was a commercial newspaper. There was always a review of a career. And there was this review of occupational therapy, and I said, oh my goodness, that's just what I want to do. So I went to school because I was very good at handwork and I was interested in medicine. And maybe if it had been more like today, I might have gone to medical school, but in those days it would have been just too much of a challenge for me. I was lazy. So I went to Columbia and got a degree in occupational therapy. And right after that, I got married, and I've been married for 59 years since then. And for a while, we lived in the Bronx, and then we moved to Queens, and have been here ever since. So that's where I'm from. My parents actually were all born here in this country. My mother was from Brooklyn, and my father was from the Bronx. But their parents were from, well, let's see, this is not about my grandparents, this is about my parents. They lived here, grew up here, and my mother lived in
Lower East Side.
the Lower East Side.
House Street.
Actually, they lived on the Lower East Side, and my dad just grew up in the Bronx. I had one older sister, 3 years older than I, and when we were little kids, we got along fine and did things together. At one point, we even talked about opening a shop because we both liked handwork, knitting and stuff. So we were going to open up a shop to not only to sell yarn, but to give instructions. And of course, we were going to have espresso coffee available. And then she went off to college, and then I went off to college, and we still maintained somewhat of a relationship for a while after that. And then she and her husband disappeared. They just left, and we didn't hear from them for 15 years. And then they showed up again, and we tried to keep in touch. They had moved, they were living in upstate New York. I mean, really upstate New York, near Canada, near Plattsburgh. And we visited them once or twice up there, and then they chose not to have anything to do with us anymore, so we managed without them. But they had 2 sons, and I managed to keep in touch with them. They're very dear young men, and they're just about the same age as my children, but I didn't know about them until they were like 6 and 8 years old. But they're very nice, fine, both doctors, and do well, and that's it. And my sister died about a year or 2 ago, and without having had any contact with her for a number of years. So it was sad, but I have lots of good friends, and we do with that. Yeah, as I said before, I studied occupational therapy, which was very good for me. There was a lot of medical studies. I took anatomy and neuroanatomy and psychology and several other medical courses, which I really liked very much. And of course, I did very well with all the handwork courses, and didn't work at that for very long, because at the same time that I was graduated from college, I also got married, and not too long after that I started having kids. So I have my 3 wonderful daughters, and then did not work at that anymore. But when my kids were like 6, 8, and 10, I started working in special ed, and did that for the next 26 years. That's it. I didn't mention along the way that I studied piano and been playing the piano. When the kids were little, I really didn't have time to practice or play, but always had a piano. I didn't get an engagement ring when we got married, but I got a Steinway piano, which I still have. And when the kids grew up, I started playing again, and was very good. I played piano 4 hands, and then got a second piano, and now I play 2 piano stuff with a piano partner, and we have a wonderful time, and sometimes play recitals, and it's really very gratifying. Well, that's interesting, because for some reason, my sister was getting piano lessons when she was like 6 or 7, and I said, me too. So when I was 3 or 4, before I went into kindergarten, I started playing piano, and I could read music before I could read English, I think. So I've just sort of always played the piano. I've never played another instrument. So piano it is, and it's classical. I never could play popular, I never could play jazz, but I can sight read pretty well, and have enjoyed piano a lot. And I've played chamber music with string players, and so we get together and have little jam sessions. And I became very active in a chamber music camp that meets every July when there's no pandemic, and have some very good friends from there as well. I worked as an occupational therapist for a while at the ICD down in Manhattan for about 1.5 years, then didn't work for a number of years, and they opened this special unit at my local grade school where my kids went to school, and I applied for and got a job there and worked with that for the next 26 years. So I really don't have much of a job history, but I have consistency. So that's it, and it was very good for me, because I came home at 3 o'clock so I could be home with my children. Well, we planned when to get married so that we could have a honeymoon of a couple of weeks, because from the time I was graduated from college, I still had 6 months of internship to go, and we didn't want to wait that long or get married without a honeymoon, so we picked June 11th, 1961. Got married, went on a honeymoon, just drove down to Florida, did some sightseeing along the way, came home, and then I went to Delaware to do my internship at the Delaware Curative Workshop, and I was there for 3 months, came back, and had the second 3 months of my internship at the Bronx VA Veterans Hospital, not far from where we were living at the time. Took a bus to work. The only thing I can really say about my childhood is that I sometimes hear people say, oh, if I could only go back to high school or do that again. I never had that feeling. Being a grown-up was much more fun than being a school kid or a high school kid. I was never too much in with kids. I was sort of bullied a bit. I was a real loner. I was very quiet when I was in school until I went off to college, and then I became the rambunctious self that I am today. I don't know if it was growing up or I didn't like who I was and I wanted to be different. I wanted to be other than that. By the time I was at Boston University, I ended up an area advisor to the other kids and so on. And I used to say, I think I had stupid written across my forehead because whenever somebody needed somebody to do something, I'd say, okay, I'll do it. Nobody else was raising their hand, so I did it, and I just became more involved in things. In high school, I had a very good English teacher, Sally Winfrey. I remember her name to this day. And she taught us how to write sentences, how to start with an introduction, a development, a conclusion, how to do a term paper. And when I was a freshman at Boston University, I turned in my first paper and I got it back with a note from the teacher, professor, I don't know if she was a professor or not, she might have just been an adjunct, saying, I have not graded this paper because I feel you have plagiarized. You have to resubmit. So I resubmitted another paper, not that I wanted to do a second paper, and I got that one back with a grade saying, I see that's just your style of writing. So that was one story from college. At the end of that term, we had to write a term paper. And then we used index cards, 3x5 cards, index cards with all your notes. And I wrote my paper, submitted the paper, and when we got back our grades, I remember one of the other students was rather annoyed, and she said, how come you got an A and I got a B+? I even turned my paper in early. And I said, well, I don't know if that's how you get graded by turning your paper in early. Maybe mine was more English, I don't know. So that was, I remember that very clearly. Along the way, at one point I started collecting little ducks, little figures of ducks. And the way I realized that a collection begins is that if you have something and somebody says, oh, she's got ducks, I'll give her a duck for a gift. And you start getting ducks and then it becomes a collection. It didn't start out, I think I'll collect ducks. And then I have other things that I really like sunflowers, and I have those. And another thing that I like are what's called a tree of life, an Eitz Chaim, and I have several of those. When I see one of those, I get that. And when I would travel, which I haven't done for a long time, I would also, if you go to a gift shop, I would look then for a duck because I already had a duck collection. So I even have some from Europe, and people have given them to me. And some of I have ducks that are letter openers. I have ducks that are pencil sharpeners, and one that's a brush, like a clothes brush. I have quite a collection, even though I never said, gee, I'm going to go collect ducks. But I ended up with a very interesting duck collection. For the last 45 years, I've gone to chorus rehearsal. So even my daughters knew, oh, Wednesday night, Mommy goes to chorus. So it sort of organizes my life. And then playing four hands, every certain day I used to meet with a different partner that we did just four-hand stuff. And now every Tuesday morning, my piano partner, Dottie, comes over and we work together for a couple of hours. She lives nearby. That's a story I can tell. How I met my piano partner. Talk about coincidences. When I retired from the Board of Ed, the union makes a big luncheon for everyone that retired that year. And I sort of didn't want to go. It was in Manhattan and it was a Sheraton Hotel or something. I said, all right, if the union is nice enough to make a luncheon for us, I ought to go. So I made myself go. I think there were 2,000 people there. And they had corsages for everyone in different colors, so you can pick a color to go with your outfit. And then you have a card with a number of what table you go to. There are I don't know how many tables there were. I was at table 17 or whatever. So I go, and there were only 2 or 3 people at that table at the time. So I went and I sat next to somebody rather than sit in the middle of nowhere. And the table filled in. And after a while we started talking, oh, how do you enjoy your retirement? What are you doing with your retirement? So the person, somebody asked me, and I said, well, I'm a musician and I play the piano and so on. So the person next to me said, gee, I'm a musician too, and my piano partner just moved to Virginia. And I said, well, my piano partner also moved, and I'm sort of looking for someone. So we decided to try it out and see how it works. Well, we had to first find out where they live. This union luncheon was for the entire city, which includes the Brooklyn, Queens, Manhattan, the Bronx, and Staten Island. So this person sitting next to me could have been from anywhere. Turns out I live on the north side of Cunningham Park and she lives on the south side of Cunningham Park. So we decided, well, let's try it out once, because it's sort of like playing tennis. If you're too much better than the other person or too much worse than the other person, it's not fun. So we said, let's try it out. I just had the one piano then. So I had a lot of music for 4 hands. She came over, or I went to her, I don't remember which. We tried it out and it clicked. We could both read through stuff, and that was in 2001, and we've been playing every Tuesday morning since then. So that was quite a wonderful story. And we still are, even during the pandemic, because she's staying quarantined, and basically we're quarantined. She gets in her car, drives over here, comes over here with her mask on, and we play for a couple of hours. So that was a very good story.
How did we meet?
Yeah.
Well, the old-fashioned way.
We didn't meet online.
All right, you want to tell it, or should I?
Well, sort of came through me. I used to babysit for the rabbi of our congregation. And not only that, but on weekends I would spend like the whole morning there. And he was the rabbi, and his wife, Millie, after a while said, you know, I'd like you to meet somebody. He's the son of a professor who is supervising our rabbi, Hanan, with his doctorate. And it just happens to be his father. So Millie gave him my phone number. And I think a couple of weeks later, she said, so did you ever call Lois? And he said, oh, I lost the number. She had to give him the number twice.
She never forgave me.
So he called, and we met, and we only dated for about a year before we decided to get married. And once we decided to get married, we were not engaged for any period of time. We got married like 2 weeks after we decided to get married, because we wanted to have a honeymoon. Oh, I think we just sort of talked it over, and his mother was getting older and sick, and said, well, if you want your mother to see you get married, what do you think? And he said, well, I'll let you know tomorrow.
Something like that. I ate a banana. I remember
He said, I have a headache, I'll take an aspirin. So he took an aspirin and called me tomorrow. And we
But
said,
actually,
all right, let's do it.
True story. Now, my mother told me to marry her, and that's a true story. Because at that time, we lived in LaSalle Street, just off Broadway. If it had a number, it'd be 124th Street. And Lois was going for occupational therapy. She took a gym course at Teachers College, which is about 119th Street in Broadway. And to get home, she'd walk down the hill to the subway, to the elevated station, or the subway, the Broadway
They just came
subway,
out for that little strip, yeah.
at 125th Street, walking downhill. I was coming home from work. I get off the station at 125th Street, and I'm walking up the hill towards LaSalle, which is 124th. And she sees me. I don't see her.
He's just daydreaming as usual.
So she stands right in front of me. And there she is. She's sweaty. She just came from gym. She got a pair of jeans on.
I had a wraparound skirt on.
A wraparound skirt or
We
something.
didn't wear jeans then.
Just coming from no showers, of course. She was going home to shower. And she's standing, I'm talking to her there on the street. So I said, why don't you come up and meet my mother? She's just half a block away. She says, okay. So I take her up and I tell Mom, this is Lois. And you talk about her.
I don't remember.
I don't remember. Anyhow, then she has to go home, so she goes down. I guess I walked you.
I think you did, yeah.
And I come home, and my mother says, "You can marry that girl."
Well, that was months before, then we continued.
In my mind, seriously, we started thinking about this summer before. She was up at Middletown.
Oh, that's right.
At psychiatric center. That was her first. Her first of the 3 workshops, and she was there for the summer.
The summer between my junior and senior year. Yeah.
So I came up to visit her, and we went around, and we went to a local park, and there was a lake, and there was some guy playing with his daughters. Remember?
Sort of. You remember it more than I do.
Yeah. So I said, that's the way you ought to be, So we got married.
So then we got married June 11, 1961. And we only met the summer, like the May, the year before. Yeah.
Oh.
And then we went skiing once.
Yeah.
Yes.
But I'll tell you something now. The first summer that we met, she was on internship. So a limited time we could spend together. I think we decided, at least in my mind, we're going to have 1 year together and 1 summer together and then start a family. And so that was the plan, but we never got to the summer. She got pregnant in the spring.
Yeah.
Didn't even know she was pregnant. We were down in Wilmington, Virginia, on a little vacation, visiting the restoration. Williamsburg, I'm sorry, Williamsburg, Virginia, the restoration. They were walking through some ancient building.
They give you a guided tour through a building,
And she got woozy. So there was a chair, and also she sat down on the chair. And God sprung from the walls. She's sitting in this ancient chair, 400 years old. So they ushered us out of the place.
Yeah, to leave. Yeah, they wouldn't let me sit on a chair.
And she was pregnant. And as she delivered early.
But I lost that one. That's not your mom. That was a
before.
Before.
So we next vacation we took was about 20 years later. So
Right.
no, we always had the kids, but I mean,
Yeah, we went camping.
Just the 2 of us.
Camping was very important
Yeah.
to us. We did.
But just the vacation, both of us took 20 years before I was on grand jury duty. And my company, I was Grumman, had to give me time off. So I think I was on grand jury 2 days a week or 3 days a week. And it worked out there was a weekend where I could take 1 Friday off from Grumman and then take 1 Monday off from jury duty. So I only have 1 absence as far as they're concerned. And we went to Bermuda.
That was our vacation.
That was our vacation.
But leaving the 3 kids was a little scary. I mean,
What was?
I was a little scared leaving the 3 kids. I made sure a neighbor had the key in case they locked themselves out, and phone numbers and whatever. But I mean, they were young teenagers; they weren't babies. But yeah, so camping. We started camping, and Arny would buy we had no camping equipment, but he would stop at Eastern Mountain Sports or someplace that you would stop at and buy stuff on his way home from work.
The big place was that place out in Jersey. Oh, on the way home from work.
Stop and buy a tent, buy sleeping bags, and so we accumulated camping equipment. And we went, the first year we went up to North Lake State Park, which is where we did most of our camping. Oh, you and I went once before we had kids, and we said we'd never do that again. We went to Eaton Park in Pennsylvania. It was terrible. It was like a big parking lot.
A commercial tent area.
Place where you park and your barbecue grill. You could reach over and turn your neighbor's bacon. It was. I said, "This is
we said never again, never again."
But then we found North Lake State Park up not far from where we have our house now, and it was just lovely. We had a great time. But the first time we went, Ellen was young, and I was really concerned about having a baby. She was still in diapers. I said, next year when she's not in diapers anymore, we'll go camping. And we did, and we went camping for 30 years after that, every summer. And then we went with Maris, and Maris was like 3, I think, the first time we took her camping. She was so cute. I remember the first time we took her camping, you folks had to go up to Boston for a wedding or something. So we agreed to meet outside of Saugerties at a parking lot. And
A diner parking lot.
Right. So your dad came with little Maris in a car seat with her little feet sticking out. She was little. And I think they had her little bicycle or something. And I said, oh my goodness, when she ends up in our car and Dad leaves, she's gonna really be upset. Dad left. She said, bye, Daddy. And that was it. She went with us and she was great. She just had a great time. And we were camping a lot since then. She went with us and you did too. And
Now she's going on her own.
yeah, that's right. It was great, great, great. So camping was a good. We couldn't go on any other vacation, but we went camping. The thing with camping is you get all your equipment together, and you go camping for a week. Then you take it apart and you get all your equipment. Then you have to put all your equipment away. Some's in the attic, some's in the basement, some's in the garage. Big pain. So after 30 years of that, I said, you know, let's get a place up there, so we don't have to pack and unpack everything. And that's we have our place we got in 2001. And now we have a camping equipment all in a big closet there. And if we want to go camping, it's all
It's
there.
wearing out.
Well, let's not worry about that. It hasn't been used that much. What made us decide that camping would be a good thing for us to do? Well, I can tell you something. When I was a little girl, I was 6 maybe, and my sister was 9, so maybe it was 7 and 10, I don't remember. My father and a friend of his were gonna go camping, and they had this big rucksack, and they packed up their stuff, and they took my sister, and I wanted to go to next year. We'll take you next year. Never happened. And the funny thing is that at my age, whatever I was, I knew that I was stronger than my sister, both either mentally or physically. I knew that I could do this. So essentially, I figured I'd marry the first person who would take me camping.
That was me. I promised to take a camp. I had been camping.
I
had a close friend, Walter Lynn.
They did canoeing camping and everything. I never
And
did that.
up in the Adirondacks. And for 3 summers we did, extensive camping.
Well, we have a cousin Frida, who's John's mother, and she loved to tell this story. She said, I'm gonna marry the first man that takes me to a concert. And she did, and they were married for 60 years until he died, yeah. And she's still living, she's 104.
I like the simplicity of the life.
Oh no, it's not simple, it's complicated. You have to do everything.
I don't mind doing things. Everything. You don't have many things. You got a saw. You got a
woods. You got
an axe. You got woods in the woods. Your fireplace. You got
I
a
love
ground
it.
floor at the tent, and you cook. And
I cook. No, that was one of my favorite things. Was at night to bank. I love the fire. I used to keep my clothes out and hang it on a hanger when we got home, just to smell the wood smoke from it. I loved it. But I used to take the fire, we'd build this beautiful fire, and I could cook everything over the fire. I'd like to bank it at night and see if I could start it again in the morning without having to use another match. And sometimes
we did.
I did. Did it teach them valuable lessons? I don't know. It taught them how to build a fire. No. You mean as far as like independence or self-reliance? I suppose a connection to nature, because we would go in the woods. I remember even taking Jace and looking for mushrooms, different kind of mushrooms that would grow. And I always talked to them about what we would find, this kind of tree, this kind of leaf. And Ellen got very attached to chipmunks, and she would get it so that they could take a nut out of her hand. So I guess it did have an effect on them as far as nature is concerned. And also they had to help set up the camp, and they had to break down the camp, and they had to know that, and Ellen was always the pole girl, and she would take out the poles or she'd put them away. They all had jobs to do, and we'd collect the wood and sort the wood by size and stuff. So I guess. Yeah, I never thought of it that way, but I guess so. We were living here, so we weren't in an apartment building, although Ellen lives in an apartment now. Yeah, I mean, we took them to the zoo a lot and stuff. When we were when your mom was first born, we could walk to the Bronx Zoo from where we were living. She, with a stroller, we could walk with a carriage. And so we spent a lot of time, remember, when she was really little, in the stroller, in the carriage, we go to see the elephants, and there's this huge elephant, and all she would look at was the little birds, because they were closer and they were moving around. And I said, but look at the elephant, and she was looking at the little birds hopping around. Well, I remember taking my friend Alyssa's sons to the zoo. What happened I wasn't working at the school at the time. I mean, her kids are now in their 20s, but the teachers had to go in, that's right, the teachers had to go in 3 days early to set up their classrooms. So I would take care of her sons, who were then 4, 6, and 8 or whatever, and I would take them to the Queen's Zoo. And when we were there, I remember we didn't just go from one animal to another. We would collect things. We would collect this kind of leaf, and there's a polynose, and we would look at things, not just the animal. So I'm sure I did that with my kids too, and that's what makes it more interesting. I now watch programs on television called The Zoo, and it's back behind the scenes at the Bronx Zoo. It's interesting. I just heard a comment yesterday on one of the extended news programs on Sunday morning, and one of the people said, history is not pre-written. And I found that a very interesting thought. A novel can be pre-written. A guy has an idea in his head and he fleshes it out. But history, you have to live history and then you look back at it. It's not pre-written. Well, the same thing, a house. You live in a house and your life is there. So it changes. Where the girls grew up is now our office, our computer room, and the guest room is now my quilting room. So it changes, and this room was added on. So it changes, it evolves, and you don't pre-write the history. You start out with a house and you make it a home, and then it grows with you. Now the upstate house, we had a different idea when we bought that house. First it was I didn't want to go camping anymore. I mean, I like camping and I like to go, and the kids still, Ellen and the kids still go up to North Lake and do the trails. But we bought that house thinking, okay, Ruth and Dave and the girls will use this house, and Julie lives in the Bronx and she'll use this house, and Ellen will see, and it just changed. Again, history doesn't pre-write itself. It changed in that you guys used it some, but then you grew up and you went to college, and then sometimes you come and use it yourself. Then Julie moved upstate, so she lives up there, so she doesn't need to go there. She doesn't live in the Bronx anymore. So so we're thinking, wow, what's going on? But then Ellen and family were coming up pretty often because they live in the middle of the city. So they come up often, and now, totally unexpected, because of the pandemic, they're now living there, working there, going to school there, virtual everything. So it's very different. At first we were almost disappointed after a few years. We're saying, gee, I don't know. And then it just became a big center in our lives. So it's new history.
Somehow when Lois and I would go up there on our own on a weekend, we felt a certain obligation to be there every few weeks. But I always found it pleasurable. So it was just, the drive was relaxing. We took our time. And just being up there, I found very relaxing. The time went fast, and it was an enjoyable weekend. Instead of it was like a date. We really don't go on too many dates. Doctor visits used to be our social life, because we'd see the doctor and then we'd go for lunch. But this pandemic just ruined our social life completely.
We go to the doctor and we have to go home and have lunch.
And that was it. Okay.
I have a mantra. Life is good. I have a sign, I don't know if you've seen it, upstate on the porch. I had it made to order when I was at the Dutchess County Fair. And they would write anything you want. It had to be only 14 letters or something, and that was it. And then Dottie gave me a mug that says, life is good. Now things are really rather distressing. Not so much for me personally, but the angst of what's going on. So life right now isn't so good, but my life is good. Struggle.
Yeah, continual struggle.
He struggles a lot. I don't. I spend half my time trying to
she
tell him not
doesn't.
to
She
struggle.
saved my life. Just merging or coordinating my feeling of independence with necessity to get along with other people. They're in constant conflict. I feel most comfortable when I'm all alone, and by now Lois is used to me. So no, I get along with Lois. Actually, I'm getting along with people more easily than I ever have, and because I don't care as much. And that includes work. I mean, I was always very professional. I was always very right. I concentrated on what I did. I did good work. I worked very hard. But I had a strong emotional feeling to the job. I wanted a good job. I wanted to be satisfied with what I did. And I got a lot of pleasure when I got praise from my colleagues, not necessarily the boss, which was good too. But I get praise from my colleagues. Very, very pleasurable, but it's for the work I did. But the emotional comradeship that many of the fellows developed, the fellows working with me, I just never felt and never did.
Never went out for drinks after work or anything.
Yeah, I never did.
But
never did.
I would say that I've described him as being asocial, not antisocial, but asocial because he is more comfortable by himself. But when we have visitors, he's always very social with them, but it would not be his choice. He doesn't seek that out.
I'm a pretty good actor.
And I would say that your biggest struggle is now getting older. You don't like that. You don't.
Oh, now it's yes.
Yeah, that's your biggest
now
struggle.
Is to coordinate or to fit my limited, continually, increasingly limited. Can you increase the limit something? Strength and mental acuity with the life that I want to live. And so far it's impossible. To continue every day is a frustration.
Complaints. When we go to the doctor and he said, well, how are you doing? Well, he's doing okay. I said, but he complains all the time. Because he can't do, I said, he wants to be 70 again. He doesn't want to be 40 again. He just wants to be 70. He told me the other day that he's cleaning out the garage because we want this guy to come and put up the new door, so he's cleaning out the garage, getting rid of stuff. He said there was a 50-pound bag of sand, and he went to pick it up, and he couldn't pick it up, and I used to be able to pick it up. I said, you're 92 years old, why do you have to pick up a 50-pound bag of sand?
I used to be able to press 125.
Yeah, used to be able to. A lot of people your age are dead.
But it's frustrating, and sleep is, just take today. You were coming. This morning we went to the farmer's market. We drove. We used to walk. It's only about 4 or 5 blocks away. But now we drive because stuff we got was kind of heavy. So that's okay. We drove. We came back. I felt good. I felt great this morning when everything was fine. I had about 2 hours until you came. I was playing in my head, okay, what I'll do, I've got something to do. I wanted to take a cup of tea. When we came back, I sat down with a cup of tea. On that chair I sat and I fell asleep.
I'm glad
That's
he
bad
didn't
enough.
spill the tea.
Sometimes when I fall asleep, I wake refreshed. Sometimes I fall down and go to sleep and I don't wake refreshed. I feel like a zombie. My knees are weak after the sleep, and that's where it was.
So that's his struggle.
And it's this morning. I had all this work I planned to do that's got to be done, and I'm just, all I can think about is sleeping some more. Well, obviously I perked up. I said this to you folks, if someone could promise me that for the rest of my life I'd feel just the way I feel now, I'd give them 6 months.
He traded 6 months to
I'd
feel
trade
like
in
that.
6 like that, just to feel like this. Then in the back of my mind, okay, what did I do today to make me feel like this? What did I do? How come I can't repeat it tomorrow? Okay. Or maybe I can, but I'm worried that I probably won't.
Okay, I was just pointing out that this is your struggle. We don't have to go into too many details.
Struggle.
I don't have a struggle. Life's good. I'm just struggling with our current world situation. No, national situation.
So that's my struggle.
Wasn't a struggle.
What?
Taking care of the 3 kids and going to work, and no.
Lois had no struggle for me for sure. Lois did everything.
Once in a while I'd lose my temper just because I was tired, and I said, I told you to clean that up, whatever. And I remember yelling at them, and the kids went upstairs, and about an hour later, your mom comes downstairs. She says, you feel better now, Mom? I said, yeah, I feel better now. Sometimes it would get me, but when I look back, I don't think about it as being a struggle. No. Greatest priorities was the family. the
I
family.
mean, in general, yeah.
What have been your greatest priorities? It's
Yeah.
family,
Yeah.
the kids. I guess the feeling is
that's so general.
you're just always a parent. It doesn't go away. I know that you hear it sometimes in stories. Oh, I can't wait till you're 18 and you're out of the house. That's ridiculous. When you're 40, you're still a parent and you still worry about them. One thing I never did with my kids was if they went someplace, like when they were going to college and go drive back to Binghamton after a holiday, I never said, call me when you get there. Because I felt if they would forget, I'd have apoplexy. So I just had to assume that they got there. And I try to do that with my kids, although Ellen likes it if I text her when I get home. Now I have to report to my kids. I'm home now, everything's okay. It's funny, I remember a time when it was almost like on a certain day that things changed, when I always did everything for the kids, and one time that they carried the packages. I was always carrying everything. We'd go shopping, whether it was for clothing or whatever, come back, I'd start cooking dinner and the kids would all lie down for a rest. I'm saying, what the heck is that about? But then at one point, the roles sort of changed a little bit, and I remember that feeling. Although, here's a cute story. When Ellen, as a mother, would be with the kids and one of them would be sick or didn't feel well, and she'd call me. Should I go to the doctor? What should I give them? Should I give them an aspirin or whatever? And one time, Sammy woke up and he didn't feel well, and he said, call Nanny. So, but I do remember that role change, and it was interesting. I didn't feel bad and I didn't feel good. I don't remember. I just think, that's interesting. Now they carry the packages for me, and you know, or if I'm walking down a hill with Ellen, she'll hold out her hand to, you know, it's a change, and it's interesting.
Yeah. And upstate, the kids are doing Ellen, Neil at their level, and Sam and Jay at their level are doing more. When Sam runs over to me when I'm taking up, we unload the car.
Right, he comes out to help unload the stuff out of the car.
He helps us unload the stuff.
Well, also because they're there. Usually we come first. See, when it's a funny situation too. When we're there, we come up on a Friday, they come up on a Saturday. We're the hosts, and they come and they help. They do stuff. They help set the table. They help cook dinner. Ella's very good with that. But now I feel, in a way, like I'm a guest.
Yeah.
Even though it's my house, I try to leave things the way she's rearranged things. If she finds something convenient that way, I don't want to put it back to the way I did it. This is now her house, and she'll sort of take over dinner unless I decide, all right, I'll cook the chicken. So it's a little different that she's there when we get there. And Neil is there, so he comes out to help, and Sam comes out to help.
Yeah.
So it's just a different situation.
I like to see the Sam and Jay working.
Absolutely.
Makes me feel good.
Absolutely. No, they're good.
Carrying.
They still leave their socks all over the place. But
I don't care about that, Lord. Cook?
No.
Did you say cook? What a dirty word.
No, I don't. But I do know that he can do certain things so that if I'm not here, like I go away, he manages. He doesn't cook too much. He'll go get Chinese takeout and use that for 3 days and do something else. But he can boil some potatoes, he can scramble an egg, he makes toast, you know, he can survive. So that's okay. No, I never wanted him to cook. I'm a good cook, so I remember telling your dad one time, I said, boy, you really do such a good job with the cooking and the grill and everything. He says, I like to eat good food. You know, that's why he does it. He doesn't have any hobbies, and he always goes upstairs and works at his desk going through numbers and papers and entering things.
Computer now drives me crazy.
Yeah, well, that's not a hobby. Whereas I have hobbies, things like quilting. That's a new hobby, but not much more than 10 years ago. 15 years ago. So it's a totally new hobby, and I enjoy it. So it's, in a way, relaxing. I don't always get to it, but when I do, and I get started, and it's always hard to get back. When you're working on something, you put it down for a couple of months, like with this time, you have to remember, no, what was I doing, and get back to it. But once you do, hours can go by, and I'm doing that. I don't feel the same way about the piano. I love to play with other people, but I don't like to practice much because that's not peaceful for me. But I like to play the piano, but I don't like to practice the piano.
I enjoy putting around the backyard.
Oh yeah, good.
I find it peaceful.
Mm.
And what I like about it is nature's very forgiving. If I screw up, don't worry about it. Next spring, it'll be like
It'll come back on.
it'll just come back. It's very, very forgiving. I can work freely, and I don't hurt anything, and it just grows back. So that's very, very relaxing. I like that. Mosquitoes kill me, but you can't have
I think
everything.
you also like shoveling the snow because it's mindless. No, I'm serious.
I use
You
nothing
just get
wrong.
into a rhythm of,
Yeah.
and you can see how far you've gone.
I was a nut, yeah. I'm too weak now, but when I was stronger, and certainly when we started here, I enjoyed shoveling the snow because it's control. I'm controlling nature. It's all covered up. When I'm done, there's a clean path from lawn to lawn, clean. I found here in the basement a heavy steel push shovel, and I used to use that because I just enjoyed lifting it. I can't even lift it now at all.
Empty.
But I used to purposely use it for the snow instead of these plastic shovels or aluminum shovels that were nice and light. I purposely picked this one, was nice and heavy, and I just like the feel of it. That's pleasurable. Oh my God.
You don't have to answer.
You do. The only one I've known for many years is you. Well, I had a very close friend whom I used to go camping with. We mentioned that before I met Lois.
But you haven't seen him since.
I haven't seen him in 50 years,
right?
So I don't know how he described me. We were close for a while. I just don't know.
Well, my friends would describe me as reliable, friendly, and creative, definitely creative, resourceful. Okay, well, 3. Then we got up to 4 now with your help. Yes,
Yeah.
Creative, definitely, but reliable. If I say I'm going to do something, they know I'm going to do it. And we have people like on the board of the chorus and of the board. I'm on 3 boards. Well, the Music Study Club doesn't count so much, but the chorus, the Vermont Music and Art Association, and I'm on both boards. I'm the secretary of one, and I'm the president of the other. The important thing about people on a board is if they're going to do what they say they're going to do. They can come to meetings. On the chorus, we have a much bigger board, and some of them just come to meetings, and maybe they give you an idea or so, but you don't know that they're going to go home and do what they said. When I take minutes at the meeting, 3 days later, they get a copy of the minutes. And so, but it's not just me. It's knowing that on that board, we have 9 people. It's a board of 9, and 3 of them come up terms of 3-year term, and every year, a different 3 come up for re-election. And we have such a good board. Everybody does something, and everybody does what they say they'll do. And that's what's important. They are reliable, responsible. They all take a job that's within their capabilities.
Luck, I would say, plays a very large part of your fortune. Just dumb luck. But hard work helps turn the luck your way. To me, it's just when I was born. Because when I was in high school, the Second World War was going on. And I just figured at high school I'm going to get drafted. I wasn't, I guess, courageous enough to enlist. I just didn't like the idea of the Army. But I was just ready to go into the Army and continue the war. So the war was over. So I went to college. So I had my degree, which you mentioned. Then I was drafted. At that time I'd say, well, look how lucky I am. I was too young for the Second World War. I'm going to be too old for the next World War. But Korea came along, so they grabbed me. But because of my college degree, I got a soft job. It was a joke. And 50 years after I left the Army, we had a reunion. That was the 50th reunion I think we went to.
It was in Washington, D.C. They sometimes had it in Chicago or whatever.
Tom Klein organized it.
But in Washington, I said, let's go to Washington. That's a nice place
Yeah,
to go.
I was detached from the main group of my outfit. They were first in Tokyo, and then they went up to
That's
Seoul.
right. You didn't know those guys, really.
Didn't really know them. And I was in Daegu with 2 lieutenants and a handful of other enlisted men. But we got out together and had a 50-year reunion. And the interesting thing, we were all college graduates, so already we were pre-selected. and we all had a very similar life.
But they didn't really keep in touch. These people.
Yeah, many of them kept in touch with each other, but not me.
Because he didn't serve with them.
We had a very similar life. I mean, we got married, we had kids. It was steady, you know, no scandals. But we sort of agreed that it was a very lucky 50 years because work was easy, jobs were easy, the country was growing. I mean, everything was good. And of course, you read history in the 60s.
Yeah.
It wasn't so good for the young kids, but
Right.
just our experience was there was just a lucky time to grow up and have a family.
Question, we did things, we would go on a hike, we'd go on a picnic, we would do things that I enjoyed doing. Went skiing one time, and we did not socialize. We went to we kid around, our first day we went to a movie. We didn't get in, it was too crowded and the line was too long, so we went to a movie, but we didn't go to see the movie.
Yeah, I remember
And
that.
we'd go out for meals and I don't know, it was just okay. I didn't, I guess, demand anything from him that he was not able to
Provide.
to do. And we didn't date for a very long time. Maybe if we dated longer, I would have said, hey,
Yeah.
this ain't working.
I'm getting out of here while I
I
can.
don't know. But, then we got together and I figured it would be a good stable life. And it was, without air conditioning.
Early in our marriage, Lois used to take me to concerts. She's since got out of that habit. But she'd take me to a concert and I'd sit there and it crowded and once I'd fall
You
asleep.
turn out the lights.
I'd go fall asleep. And then at the end, I'd wake up, everyone's clapping when I wake up. So I start clapping too, everyone's clapping. So she hit me, literally. She hit me. She said, you didn't listen, you can't clap.
Zero.
It's
He
a
doesn't
shame.
even listen when I play.
It's a shame.
When Dottie and I play, and as I'm playing it, you don't even know this, when I'm playing, I'm saying, gee, somebody else might say, oh, I like that piece. And he doesn't hear it, not
Seth.
because he doesn't hear well. His brain doesn't hear it. He
Seth.
just doesn't hear it.
Several things I remember
Oh,
the
one or
names of
two
which I
things,
like. but
okay.
Maybe half a dozen if I'd work hard at
Right,
it.
okay, no, 3. And that's too bad, and sometimes I think, how did I get into this?
Get involved with this game. I always encourage you, I never held you back.
Absolutely, no, absolutely, always supported me more than encouraged in going to Vermont. You wanna go for 2 weeks, go for 2 weeks, whatever. Wednesday night, chorus night, every Wednesday night for 45 years. He was working out of town. His job sent him down to Princeton to work on something. For several weeks, he would come home every Wednesday night from Princeton. He would leave work, drive home, come in to stay with the kids so I could go to chorus. And then early the next morning, he would go back to Princeton. So talk about being supportive. The music didn't mean anything to him, but if he knew it was important to me, he would come home every Wednesday night.
I'd get home about 7 o'clock.
And I'd leave at 5
I'd
after
walk
7.
in, the kids would be around the kitchen table, right over there, the round table which we used. I'd walk in, Lois would get up and walk out, take the car, and go to chorus.
So it worked out for 59 years.
Yeah, I think I was lucky marrying Lois. I would have been a mess. And another mantra, yeah, repeated many times when I was younger. I haven't thought about it for many years now. Make it do, use it up, and do without. And I do think in a way that affected my life. Push things more than I should.
Oh well.
Bit of a nut.